I'm Ariana Grande.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Erivo.
And you're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Visit bpn.fm to discover more.
There's a cat over here. There's a cat over there. And the wrong one died. And the wrong one died.
Welcome to The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. I'm your host, Mike Abrams, and today we have another amazing guest. She played Jennyanydots in the 1987 third U.S. National Tour of Cats. So welcome, Cathy Susan Pyles, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
I am so excited to talk because I have lots of Jenny questions still, and I've talked to a few of the different Jennyanydots, but we'll get to the plot, we'll get to the story. I love hearing about your experience with cats, especially on tour at that stage of cats. It was very early on. It was the first time the U.S. was really getting to experience. So tell me a little bit about what it was like when you got cast, what it was like being on tour. What was cats in that period of time like?
All right. Well, I had just come off of 2 national tours. I had done almost a year long with Lauren Bacall in Woman of the Year. And I was the swing in that, which meant I covered 6 other ladies, plus I understudied Marilyn Cooper, who was one of the leads. So I'd done that. And then I went out on tour for a year and 3/4, just about, with 42nd Street. Okay. So it was fun when I jumped onto Cats because I was sort of revisiting a lot of cities around the country. And that's what I love to tell people. Between those 3 tours, I saw most of the United States. And I can tell you the best places to live in the United States and the cities you just want to drive right past. So
I might put you on the hot seat. I'm now curious where. Let's start with the good one, actually. Where's your best place to live?
Oh, well, there was actually a lot of really, really good ones, but there's a couple really like, ooh. But again, you have to put this in perspective. This was quite a few years ago. And what was really interesting actually was watching the cities change, because when I first went out, I think it was 83, 84. And that is right at the time when all of the cities in America had moved out, the malls. The malls just drained the downtown stores. So all the department stores, the lovely places, everything had moved out to the suburbs, and the downtowns where the old theaters still were and where we were housed had almost nothing. By the time I rolled back through with Cats, which was 87, 88, you started to really see the revival of all of these cities. You know, downtown Detroit on my first tour, oh my God. But you came back 6 years later and these things that were happening. So that in itself, I think, was worth schlepping the suitcases across the country for a total of 15 years, was seeing that.
15 years, wow. So what is the reaction of, let's take a Detroit. What kind of crowd reaction did you get from your first 2 tours versus the Cats reaction?
Oh, okay. Well, the first one, of course, was a star vehicle. So that was Lauren Bacall. So people were there to see Lauren Bacall. The script itself, the story in Woman of the Year, really wasn't that self-sustaining. But 42nd Street, that had a cast of 50. And
50 on tour?
Yes,
wow.
Close to 50. And so that was just a huge, immense thing. And so the show was the spectacle. So I'd had that experience 2 years before Cats. And Cats was very much the same kind of thing in terms of, it was one big spectacle, you know, and the people were there because of the spectacle. And they were 2 completely different experiences for me personally. And some things about each one were great, and some were hard as an actor to do. So that was an interesting setup. But
so that tour, I know your Cats tour was really the first time that Cats got introduced to a lot of cities.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm just so fascinated and curious by like it's a bizarre show. Like it's definitely an experience.
Totally weird.
And you are providing that first experience to sold out theaters across the nation and this is pre social media and buzz. It's like there might be one or two reviews ahead of it and you might be in these cities. So I'm just fascinated by the reactions and like what the crowd response was at that time where it's an unknown with this like almost cultish buzz coming through.
Yeah. Well, again, I keep referencing it off of the 42nd Street tour I had done right before. So we had blasted through all of these cities that had these glorious old theaters in the centers of their downtown, but they hadn't been used for years. They'd kind of dried up because there wasn't a whole lot of touring theater for a while. There were some shows, but not nearly so many. So we were coming into towns with both 42nd Street, and then 2 years later, they had cleaned up most of the theaters because we had an equity rep in almost every city on 42nd Street because things backstage just weren't up to code and up to standard. And so that was challenging. Fitting the set into these theaters was remarkably, some of the theaters were now being used as movie theaters. So there was no wing space for scenery.
Wow.
Yeah, when I did 42nd Street, they literally opened the door right before we were supposed to do the dime number with these metal dimes and rolled them in from the cold alley, freezing temperatures, and we had to sit on them with our little tushies. But with Cats, all those theaters now had started to fix themselves up. But the cities were still, I think, just remarkably enthralled with this show. And I think, I mean, the big joke always is that why did Cats run so long in New York? Why did that song go on for years and years and years, right? And I think it's just because, everyone has a cat or knows someone who has a cat. So it's like it's a weird thing to relate to, but people can. And second of all, it was completely unnecessary to translate. So any foreign language, I mean, they talk about the Japanese tourists supporting it in New York for years, because you didn't have to be a competent English speaker to appreciate Cats. It was so visual. It was it was sort of visual overload,
It is. And I think that's what having seen it the first time in New York, and then knowing that like, wow, this is going to be the first introduction to it, thinking it back to your tour of like, that's the first introduction to this city, to this experience where it's so different, not like anything else that's around. I like am fascinated to hear that aspect of it, because I don't know anybody here where I'm from that went to that tour. I know it came through, and it came through Chicago and a lot of the other Midwest cities. And I have been able to find some of the reviews, which was very fun to kind of see these like archived old reviews that were someone like scanned in from your tour, but it sold out in minutes. Sold out like so quickly. And so the buzz was there in a time where the buzz was like very different than current buzz, and so that's a very cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah, it was. People would stand outside the stage door. It's just strange groupies, wanting you to sign their program. And I mean, that was always my running joke in the show is I had in 42nd Street, I had played a supporting role. And it was a real identifiable role. And so when I'd come out the stage door, everybody knew who I was. But I would come out the stage door in Cats, and there would be a group of people out there, and they'd go, oh my God, you were so wonderful. You were fantastic. Which one were you?
Yeah. No idea.
And I would try to explain who Jennyanydots was. And the funny thing about Jenny is that she has a lot to do in about the first 30 minutes of the show. And then she sits on the tire for the next 2 hours. So they don't. If I would try to explain which number I had done, what I had, they just would look at me and go, oh, okay. So then I started just saying. They'd say, "Which one were you?" "Oh, I was the white cat."
Oh.
And they'd go, "Oh, okay. I was not the white cat. I was 5'8". The white cat was like 4'3".
I thought you were going to say, because did your cast do the cockroaches or mice tap number?
Yes, we did. They did, but I was not in. Well, oh yes, the cockroach. There's the peaks and the pollicles, which is the one.
So that's later, right?
And that's
with
weird.
Gus.
And then there's the whole Siamese thing in Act 2, which got cut, I think, in the subsequent.
It
tours.
was not. Yeah, it was not in the one I saw.
Yeah, and they took that out.
Yeah, my frame of reference is the 1998 movie and the 2016 cast, or like Broadway revival, because that's all I've seen.
Yeah, it was different.
I've heard enough now, but and then the current movie, like the
oh no, don't even go there. Oh my God, I tried.
But okay, we'll maybe come back to that. but I do, like, I did, that would be the way I would describe Jenny. It was like, oh, which one you say? It's like, it's the one that shed the coat and that did the really cool tap number with I think it was cockroaches or mice in the version I saw.
Yeah, the cockroaches.
Yeah, which is it was like my New York nightmare. Yeah. Was cockroaches there. So I was like, it was a very memorable piece of the show for me, because I was like, oh, that's not like, that's what I don't want to ever have happen in New York. It's like when I moved to New York, I was like, oh, I just don't want cockroaches. That's all I was. So it was a little traumatizing. Yeah. But tell me about what you were told about the story when you're going on this tour, because I do think like it's such a polarizing plot line, which is what I've spent a lot of time trying to decipher. And I know you get, as a cast member, a little bit more inside information. So I'd love to hear what you were told.
Well, yes and no. I replaced into the national tour at the 6-month mark. At the 6-month mark, because you sign a contract for 6 months when you're in those shows, they had a bit of a bailout. I think 6 or 7 people left at that 6-month mark. And so I came in and I was pushed in really quickly. And so
they didn't give you any, I mean, they have to give you some, right? Like, they have to tell you kind of how to loosely play her.
You get several afternoons with the choreographer and then like maybe one afternoon with one of the stage managers who gives you their rendition of stuff. And the funny thing for me was there was a whole bit that I had to do about watching. It was sort of a pantomime-y thing in the beginning when Munkustrap is describing, he's singing the first part of the song and she's walking around doing stuff. And there was all this mime in it. And I kept saying, okay, I'll do it. You know what? It just didn't make any sense to me. And I was supposed to be watching the feather fall and all these things with moving my head and doing all this mime. And finally, I found out that the girl who had played it in the first national, I think, had been a pantomimist. She was really, really, really good at pantomime. And so she had created this bit, and that was now for every subsequent Jenny had to do this thing.
Was standard. Okay.
Yes. And there's actually a rider that you have to sign in the contract at that time that said any bit that you develop becomes the property of the show. So if you created anything and they liked it and they kept it, they could pass it on. That was part of the standard rider. So that was interesting. So I do know a little bit about the show. I had seen it originally when it first opened in New York. And then I was actually doing an industrial show in the Bahamas Bermuda. I think I was in Bermuda when I got a phone call from the casting director, Vinny Liff. And he said, hey, Cathy, can you be in Baltimore on Tuesday to go into Cats? And I said, well, Vinny, it's Saturday and I'm in Bermuda. I know. Can you be in Baltimore on Tuesday? I said, okay. Okay. So I flew back the next day because it was an industrial show I was doing and it was done. And then on Monday night, because at that time Cats had a Monday night performance in New York, and I went to see the show. Now, mind you, I had a back surgery the year before. And when I had seen Cats, it was another 2 years before that or something. So I literally was watching from the back of the theater. First, they measured me to see if I was going to fit the costumes and the wigs and stuff. And they did a whole wig fitting. And then they sent me out to watch the show. And all I did was stare at where Jenny was entering and exiting. so that my mind was
one character.
Can I do that? Can I do that? How much dancing does she do? And I, of course, I've always called myself an actor, singer, dancer in that order. I was very late to come to dancing. And so I was sitting there watching to say, can I really do this show? Can I really do this? Because I had auditioned for it 6 months before and not been cast. Mm-hmm. So I had just put it out of my mind. And so I literally watched it. And then they got to the Jellicle Ball. And that's when everybody's dancing all over the place. I mean, I watched the tap number and I'm like, that I can do. Tap I can do. Piece of cake, that I got. Because I'd just come off of 42nd Street. And so when the Jellicle Ball happened, I was staring because it's like 12 minutes long. And I was like,
it's a workout.
When does she enter? When does she exit? And then I looked and she was like, wait, she just exited stage left. And I would wait and I was waiting. She's still gone. She's still gone. Okay, still gone. Oh, damn, there she comes. And she'd come on from stage right and be in the next part. I was like, okay, so I'm going to have to learn that. Because I was quickly trying to analyze, do I have the physical stamina to do this crazy thing? Because I was also a bit older than most of the rest of the cast. So, and not being a premier dancer, I was just panicked, but yeah.
I think that was when I did see it the first time. And I spent a lot of time a little peeved at the plot, which is very well documented at this point. Okay. But I did walk out saying, that was one of the most physically demanding things I've watched anybody ever do, like live, and coming from someone who watches a lot of sports and everything else, I was like, yeah, these athletes, they train for that. I was like, oh no, these athletes and dancers train for this. Like that took so much effort and so much movement, and to do it in that costume with all that makeup on and everything else of like the acting, was it the felinity of like trying to also be on crawling around, like it is, and it is a lot. And I was really, really like, that was one of my biggest takeaways, besides my anger of Grisabella being the wrong choice, is I walked out saying, wow, that is peak performance of people doing something that they're highly skilled at that most people can't do. Yeah.
And it's structured, I think, in a way that people don't realize. When you look at it, you think, oh my God, everybody can sing, dance, and act. And when you actually break down the structure of each character, you can really see that there's one strength, one super strength, and a secondary medium strength, and one not so important. And there really are only a few that have to be absolute triple threats, that have to do all three things absolutely the same. Because like I said, Jenny had to be a singer, and she had to be able to do the tap dance number and be funny. But she didn't have to do a whole lot of that Jellicle Ball. So,
well, and you have the pantomime now.
Yeah, just the pantomime.
So you got to do a little more. I am a little fascinated by that little aspect of it. What else was created? Did you create anything that they were like, that they took from you because of your contract? Or do you know of any of the other things that kind of the legacy preserved because of that rule?
Well, I think all of it, anytime there's an original cast, just like with Hamilton recently, there's an original cast, they have contributions that they make to the show. And if I'm not mistaken, Hamilton had a whole lawsuit about trying to make sure that entire first initial cast was granted a royalty of some sort for their contributions to the show. And that had never happened before that I'm aware of. But so pretty much everything you throw in there in an initial rehearsal. But I did not have to do that 6 weeks of crawling around and sniffing each other that everybody else talks about, since I was thrown in so quickly.
Yeah. So how would you describe Jenny?
Oh, so yes. I did listen to one of your previous podcasts, and the person had done Jenny in the 2016 tour, I think.
I did. I talked to two from the 2016 tour.
Anyway, I
do it. Yeah.
I only heard the one, and she was sort of saying, well, everybody else played Jenny as this old crotchety cat. And I was like, no, we did not.
Yeah.
Hello. She's like, well, we played her much younger than those original people. And I was a little taken aback by that, because my take on her, and again, we played other cats. We played neutral kind of people until we had that step out moment, which was really, because I played the Gumby cat, which is what Jenny plays. And the Gumby cat is supposed to be the fat, sassy cat who sits in the sun, the one that just lazies around all day and but then comes alive at night, is very nocturnal. But I think I played it with a lot more youthful energy than was implied by your other guests.
It was either Eloise or was Sarah, are the two that I talked to that were Jenny's.
Yeah.
And I'm now very curious which one. So
I'm not sure. But I just thought they made it sound like all us original people were really crotchety. I mean, Anna McNeely was the original, right? And she was this amazing soprano. And so she's one of the two people that had to hit that high C. But that got changed in the touring companies. If they cast a Jenny, well, actually, at one point on our tour, 3 of the companies were within a ride of each other. So there was the one company sitting in Chicago, and then there were 2 companies touring, and we were all close enough together that the producers actually held a banquet and moved us all together on Monday night. So there are photos of the 3 of us who all played Jenny. I'm 5'9". The next girl was 5'4", and then the third girl was Robin. She's like 4'11". So we were completely different physical types. And originally I thought, so it's really, I think, more than people are aware, it was more about your energy, the kind of energy you had. All 3 of us were funny, big smiles, big, perky funny. So that was definitely a part of what they were looking for. But it didn't
where was that held?
I think we were near Chicago. Well, we had to be near Chicago. And I can't remember. We were in Indiana somewhere, I think, actually. I think we were in Indiana. But they brought the 3 companies together on a Monday night for a get-together. And that was pretty freaky. That was a little freaky.
I'm going to start asking everybody I know in the Indiana theater world if they were part of the banquet.
The banquet, yeah.
The Cats banquet.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I want to continue a little bit about the plot.
Okay.
How would you describe, having been in the show, if someone has not seen it, you've got a friend that's not seen it, they're going to go see the future tour on whatever comes back to Broadway, whenever theater opens back up and it's back on, how would you tell them what they're about to go witness?
The first words out of my mouth would be, there is no plot.
No plot.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, it was based on T.S. Eliot's, series of poems. And so I think that's the big weakness of the show. That's what the creative team spent so much time trying to make it make sense. I mean, I get it. All the cats had very specific personalities. Demeter was supposed to be neurotic, and it's like, well, why? Was she attacked and raped, or what's the deal there? But
so a lot of people think. I mean, that's why there's so much to this show, because, and I think you covered an interesting piece of this, is that like every different cast does it a little different because it depends on the person and the energy and the different vocal range and all these other pieces to it. And maybe they're pulling something because the last person did it and they want to keep that. But because of that, there is almost zero consistency to like what this loose plot actually means. Right.
Because I know that when I went in, I was a tap dancer, and not everybody who played Jenny was a really great tap dancer. They could do the steps and stuff, but I mean, they pulled me over on the second day and he goes, "Come here a minute, I got something for you." And he gave me a whole extra thing to do across the floor. And he says, "I give this to the people who can tap dance." So I did have an extra little, I mean, within the same time, but most people just did a simpler step at that point, and he did some embellishment there, but I don't really know. I mean, they meet one night a year, right? In the junkyard, to choose the person who's going to the Heaviside Layer. Now, is there ever any question about who that should be?
I think that's the $1 million question.
Yes. I mean, why is Grisabella the chosen one? Because she's the one that deserves redemption? Is it?
That's a common argument. I don't like making all the Grisabella arguments, but there are plenty of them out there. I I think the redemption is obviously is probably the most common. The most needing of to be reborn is a pretty common argument.
Yeah.
The old Deuteronomy teaching everybody a lesson about redemption is kind of an argument I've heard more that I did not expect to hear.
Oh, wait, go on with that for a minute.
So I've heard a few people give variations of this, is that old Deuteronomy who's making the choice is using Grisabella as almost a vehicle to teach the younger cats and all the other cats and potentially even the audience on being a better person, being good, like a lot of different versions of what, but it's his decision is about teaching others, and Grisabella just happens to be his vehicle for that.
His Mary
which I
Magdalene?
thought was very, very interesting take of it, but also different. But I've argued a lot of different other cats too. So we'll get to that because that's my last question for you. That's always one of my last questions.
All right.
The other part that I'm fascinated by, and I'm curious if you thought about this, if ever came up, it seems like it came up less in your cast than in other ones, but what about the relationships between the cats? So which cat do you think you're the mom of? Did you ever think about that? Did you play it a certain way? How did Jenny's cat's family almost play into the plot?
Right. Well, we were told from the beginning, these are the kittens. Mm-hmm. These are the frisky kittens, the white cat who's supposed to be on the verge of pubescence, and then you had Syllabub, who is actually the connection that reaches out to Grisabella, right? They have that moment at the end where they share the song and sing in harmony for a second, and then there's this transfer from perhaps you will get the redemption and be this innocent young thing, because Syllabub's played usually very innocently. Pouncival is always played as frisky, ornery, but maybe that's because the guy in our company was that way. He was very young and had 300% energy all the time, But, so I don't know. I think Jenny was always one of the maternal ones, but honestly, in our company, both Jenny and Jelly kind of were maternal. Maybe we were both older, just the two actresses in our company. We were older than some of the others, and I don't know. I think I always had a great relationship. I think I gravitated more to the actor than the character.
Okay,
probably a terrible thing to say, but
I think it's not uncommon.
When you come into a company, you see who's open for you, who's receptive to you on stage, because you spend hours out there with your arms crossed and, watching somebody else do their thing. I think I probably did feel kind of responsible for Skimbleshanks being a little nuts.
Tell me more about that. How are you responsible for that?
I don't know. Because he was there before me, but maybe it was just an energy that Jonathan had in our company. He was so silly and so fun and so completely outrageous, but there was such affection from him. I just viewed him as if you were a mom cat and you'd had a litter, this is the one you liked. Yeah.
It's so wild to hear it. And that's why I asked this question a lot, because there is a little bit, it seems like, of if the energy or what you're playing off the actual other actor, or if you were friends before and you knew it, but then when you meet these super fans who I've talked to a few, and it's like, those cats shouldn't like each other, or like there is some beliefs sometimes in the plot. And I think Cats kind of gives the ability, because it's such a loose plot. It's what's made this analysis of the plot so hard and unique, is that there is no answer to most of it. So I can get an answer from you about how you played it, and I can get an answer from the other two Jennys about, did they think they were the mom of somebody, or if they were, parents with another, like with Old Deuteronomy. But there's not consistency across shows. And that's a very unique thing. Whereas when I feel like a lot of other stuff that goes on tour or you see over time, it's like, no, that character really is going to play that character. And there's not a lot of variance. There's maybe a little bit of personality or, a little bit of customization, but I'm trying to think of a good example. I don't know enough about Broadway in general, but like I did love the Book of Mormon. The two main guys are going to kind of always be about that two personality types. Now they might have some tweaking of it, but the two main characters are generally going to be kind of the straight and narrow and kind of the nerdy fun.
Yeah.
That is not always the case in Cats, which I find so unique.
Yeah. I mean, you have certain characters in there that are paired up. You know, you have the Mungo Jerry, Rumpelteazer, so they are who they are, and they are very connected at the hip in their number. But we had a lot of couples on our tour, roadmances, as we call them. Of course, when you're on tour, roadmans. Yeah, a lot of people were together on our tour, so I'm sure there was a little more connection on stage in some moments. But it was an interesting thing. There are so many cats, I think, in the show that are so well defined. Maybe it's because of just the structure of the way the musical numbers were written. You know, Monkey Strap is always the leader, the guy who, he's the organizer and the leader and the calm one. And, you know, and then you have Bomb Ballerina, who comes in as the sexy cat, who's just the sultry. There's always one of those Marilyn Monroes, you know, but so there's that. But then Demeter is just always, why pair up Bomb Ballerina and Demeter for that number? You know,
there are a lot of unanswered questions that I still have about this show. I think that's an interesting one. I think a lot of people think they're sisters.
Well, but then the third person thrown in there is Jelly Lorem in the singing. So was it just because those were the three girls that could sing the harmonies when they first opened in London?
That's probably a better answer than trying to actually analyze like the Cats' backgrounds,
because they have that three-part harmony through that whole thing, and it's, I don't know. Yeah.
Again, so many unanswered questions that it's hard to fill in the blanks. I want to touch. I want to hear a little bit about the both benefits you did. So I know that I love hearing a little bit about the benefit you did in on tour, and then how you had a 30-year kind of reunion of it last year, where you're able to reconnect and do something, you know, for the Broadway Cares. So tell me a little bit about the tour one when you were on the road.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember whose brainstorm that was. It might have been Jonathan Cerullo and a few others, but I don't recall how it started to germinate, but they decided to do this. You know, we were right in the middle of the AIDS crisis, and nobody really understood the severity of that and how much it was impacting the theater society. And they just started doing, let's do a tribute to, we did a tribute to Michael Bennett, who of course everyone knew had AIDS and was fairly sick at the time, as I recall. And so we just picked a whole bunch of songs that we liked from that he had been connected to. And it was amazing. And I don't know who did the forework because we were 2 months out from being in Kansas City, which is where we actually did this benefit. And we did it in cohesion with a group in Kansas City that was working on AIDS, assisting people with AIDS. And we had no idea what we were doing. We were just having fun, but we were rehearsing every day and building costumes and building props to do this benefit. And we got there that night, and I'm sure you've heard other people tell this story. We had to hold the house because they said that the line was literally around the block. Literally gone up and around the block of people, and it was packed. If the fire marshal had walked in, we would have been dead, and we auctioned off posters and other stuff, whatever we had. And I don't know, I don't recall. I think it was $30,000 or something, which in 1986 was a huge amount of money, 85, 86. And then we did a couple more on the tour, smaller. We did one in Washington, D.C. I know it was just kind of a late night club act after the show. And we did a couple of other things, but it was pretty magical. that we were able to pull that off, and we felt good about it. And that was one of the first things that when the Actors Fund and Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS all kind of came together.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and then you regrouped 30 years later.
Oh my God, more than 30.
more than a little more than 30 years later to do something again. So tell me a little bit about how that came to life. And and you did that remotely with everyone.
Yeah.
So that was a different experience for sure.
Oh my God, it was amazing. It was Jonathan and Austin Jaton, who played he was our understudy for Old Deuteronomy, and one of the booth singers. I think it was the two of them that started it. And they sent out messages to us all, and then they had an organizational meeting, and it was so strange, but wonderful, because, you got to see people I haven't been in touch with in years, literally years. And people have shifted their careers, of course, because not everybody's still able to throw their foot up over their head. But, Debbie Genevieve, who was our Demeter, she now works in publicity and advertising, so she took on that role. And Lisa Dawn Cave is one of the most important stage managers right now, one of the few stage managers of color. And she stage managed us even for the Zoom meeting. She was fantastic. She just shut people up and organized us through it. And they said, how many of you want to do it? And I think, gosh, almost everybody came. A handful did not. But then they said we had to do the opening number. And we were all like, oh my God, there's too many words in there. I mean, my old fart brain, I was like, and we weren't to do any of the original choreography because that wasn't in the licensing that they had gotten, the permission that they had gotten to do this benefit. But I remember standing here trying to videotape myself, and I don't know anything about that. So my daughter was helping, and when we finally got one decent take, and she's like, oh, my battery died. And so I was like, okay. But there were so many freaking words that I literally had like 12 pages of just the lyrics, mind you, taped up all around different angles from my camera lens so that I could see where the hell I was in that thing. I don't know how I memorized that show back then. I have no idea.
I remember when I saw the benefit, I was like, that's an interesting choice for the songs of all of the choices, because it definitely feels like one of the most difficult to do.
Super hard.
Well, that has still raised a lot of money. The link is still up. I'll put it in the description, and I think that they're still, taking donations. So it's something that was really cool to see, and kind of get to see your cast kind of come back to do something that is related to something you did on tour, which I think is just such a unique and cool piece to this.
Yeah, and one of the fun benefits for me is we still have we call it the ladies dressing room, and about 8 of us still hook up about once a month.
Wow.
Yeah. And with a glass of wine in our hands on a Sunday and just yammer. And it's been so much fun during this whole COVID thing to reconnect with those wonderful ladies. And I think they let Jonathan in once, but
Jonathan, he got to bring his wine once.
He got to be a lady once, but yeah. And so that's, one of the wonders of Zoom, of all the things we hate about Zoom. And
there's been, I called them the silver linings out of a lot of bad that have been there, more time with family, or being able to do things that you wouldn't be able to do before. So I do appreciate, being able to take a look at some of the positive things that have come out of something that's had a lot of negative things.
Yeah.
Let's do some rapid fire. If you were not Jenny and you could play one other cat, forgetting vocal range, if the cat's supposed to be male, female, if you could just play any track, which one would you want to do?
Well, my fantasy head says I would like to be Bomb Ballerina.
To go out there and sing McCavity.
But I could never pull it off. But I think that would be it. Grisabella would scare the crap out of me.
You don't want to belt it out every night?
Oh my God, that thing is in the most incredulous range. And they used to say that they wanted those women to almost feel like that was it. You couldn't do any more. They wanted your range to be so extended that you felt like you were at the end of it. And so they didn't. There are those magical people out there that can just belt all the way up and all the way back down, and there's no break in their voice. I'm not one of them. So,
well, I'm not one of. I can't do any of this stuff. So that's why I asked this question. I'm always like, well, you all have the talent to do probably more than one. I have the talent to do none of them. So I want to say, like, suspend that talent. Which one would just be fun? So So Bomba Urina, who's your favorite and least favorite cat? Not actor, just cat character.
Well, my favorite's probably Skimbleshanks. There's just, because his stuff just is so random and it comes out of nowhere, and he builds a train, and there's something so creative and funny about that, although I have no idea what that has to do with the plot. But then again, so maybe that's
a very common part to a lot of these things.
Yeah. Old Gus is kind of sweet, just in his ability to reminisce and go back into his, dementia.
What about the least favorite?
Least favorite? Oh, the one that shoots up out of the floor in the original production. That's always played by. Hold on, I'm looking at my list. Okay, well, McCavity's pretty scary.
Yeah, McCavity's a bad guy.
Yeah,
but I'm curious who jumps out of the floor. I'm not sure who you're referencing.
Oh, it was Alonzo, the Rumpus Cat. And Rumpus Cat, and in the original production, he shot up out of the floor.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a fairly common answer. It seems like Alonzo kind of rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah, he does. I don't know if he was just not given enough to work with, or, he doesn't really have a super standout feature other than being the Rumpus Cat. And he always came up and did that kind of, weird.
Yeah. That picture is, I've seen that picture many times.
Yeah.
What about favorite song?
Oh, well. Memory I used to hate, but ever since Leslie did it in this last, God, Matt Zarley, who was our Pouncival, is the one who did all the editing on that showed all the streets of New York empty, and so now I'm kind of liking Memory, but maybe that's just because I'm really old. I think the favorite song, I like the first part of the Gumby Cat.
The first part, okay. Half the song.
That part.
Okay.
I love that, the melody.
Yeah. Now the final question, the $1 million question.
Uh-oh.
I've argued that I don't think Grisabella's the right choice. I did just give you a bunch of the arguments for Grisabella. Do you agree that Grisabella is the right choice to go the Heaviside Layer? And if not, who would you pick? And if you do agree, which of the many defenses of Grisabella would you invoke?
Well, I think if you're thinking sacrifice, then it might be one of the kittens. If it's the sacrificial lamb.
Which kitten would you sacrifice?
I don't know. Between Syllabub and the white cat, and maybe even Cassandra, although she's played a little bit more mature. But between Victoria and Syllabub, maybe, because then you have the sacrificial lamb.
I like this argument. I don't think I've had anybody make a sacrifice argument, so I'm always a fan when someone takes a different approach.
I don't know. I loved watching, the last moment of the play when Grisabella's finally accepted by the crowd, because she's so snubbed by the whole town until that last moment. She goes through, people reach out one by one to touch her, which is what she sings about. Somebody touch me, touch me, touch me. So I don't know. I think maybe one of the kittens. I think that would be impactful, but a little bit freaky for people.
Yeah, that might have been a little darker of an
Yeah,
ending.
way darker. Because
But-
I mean, we'd see this horrible, rundown, destroyed person thing, cat, and we want to see her have salvation. You know, we
I
wanna
like
see
your
her-
first answer better. I think you should sacrifice Victoria as part of it, or you said Syllabub or Victoria as a sacrifice to the Heaviside Layer gods of above. The old Deuteronomy is going to have to choose, and you're going to go young instead of old. That's kind of the opposite of it. I love it. I think it's great to take a different approach.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm here
questions.
for it.
I never asked myself any of these questions my entire life. So
That's the beauty of the podcasting world, is that questions that should never be asked are being answered many times.
Asked and answered.
Asked and answered very, very much. I thank you so much for humoring me, for also making the first sacrificial kitten argument, which I'm a huge fan of. And for coming on and sharing stories from your time in cats.
What great fun. Thank you.
And thank you everyone else for listening to this episode of The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. To follow along, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Wrong Cat Died, or check out our website, thewrongcatdied.com.